When Covid-19 hit, one of the biggest changes was that we could no longer have visitors coming into the hospital unless it was exceptional circumstances. For our families, that was huge. It was so difficult for them to maintain that contact and that communication with their families, and they were totally reliant on the hospital staff to keep them connected. Tony was one of our patients that came after a prolonged spell in intensive care, and when he first came to our ward, he was suffering from something called post-ITU delirium, which is quite common, but it's actually very scary for the family.
We were introduced to a lovely lady called Ruth Bradford, who was just phenomenal. And I think the most important thing for me was the consistency. Having somebody who had seen him today and would see him tomorrow and could give you a comparison, where we had not had that through the whole of his time in ICU. Very rarely did we have the same nurse twice, was just priceless. We didn't see Tony for 7 weeks. It was just awful. And every time we wanted to find out how he was, we spoke to some amazing people who gave us medical information, but having somebody who normalised the situation, like Ruth, was just amazing, because all of a sudden it just felt like we were going through something that was bearable. She could say, well, today he's doing really, really well, or he's still as he was yesterday. And for us, that meant everything. It meant absolutely everything.
We put ourselves in those families' shoes and thought, how awful would it be if the person that you loved was in hospital and you couldn't go in and see them, and your only point of contact was ringing a ward telephone and hoping that somebody picked up quickly and you spoke to the right person that could tell you exactly what was going on.
Prior to setting up a video call, you would always have to set up what it would look like, explain to the family that we'd be wearing masks and you'd be seeing us first, and then we would show you your loved one. In those conversations as well, I would also describe what the ward environment looked like. So if they were by a window, for instance, I would show them the view that their loved one would have. We could show them what the ward looked like, where the nurses were.
I'm not too sure how the relatives feel, because we will be wearing all the PPEs with the masks, so we would look like astronauts in front of them while having the video call. But in a way, it gives them relief that their relative's there, that their loved one is able to listen to them, can hear their voice, they can say hi, even if they're not responding.
What they were doing was talking to us in the multidisciplinary team meeting after a ward round and saying, this is what that patient actually likes. They like to read the Daily Mail every day, and they're really interested in football, and this is their favourite food. And it's something that we don't normally have the time to do, and nor the focus on, medically orientated ward rounds. But it's something really important because it individualises the person. It makes you regard someone as a person with disease rather than a patient.
What we found as we were going along, that we became really part of some really important and privileged conversations that as nurses or health professionals that we would never normally see or hear. And that was because we were facilitating these video calls or telephone calls. And I used to set up a call we had an old fellow in his 90s who had dementia, and what was really important to him and his family was that he remained connected to his wife. So every day I used to link up with her carer, and the two of them used to have a video call, and it was so lovely. They were so much in love, and most of their conversation was about how they loved each other.
There were several ways that we enabled families to keep that connection. One of them was through the hearts that members of our local community knitted for us. And what we would do is we would have a conversation about the hearts over the telephone and say, how about if I give a heart to your dad, I'm going to pop one by his bed and I'm going to put one in an envelope, send that to you, and then that will help to keep you connected and hopefully bring you some comfort. The conversations were quite intense at times. There were quite a lot of tears, but you also really knew that you were making a difference when you were having those calls.
If there's one thing that we should take away from Covid-19 that I thought was a really added value service, it would be looking at translating family liaison from the COVID situation, where it's been essential because we haven't allowed relatives to visit, into an everyday situation where relatives will be returning to hospital to see their loved ones and people who are ill, but taking away those messages about communication, individualisation, and creating emphasis on something we weren't doing as effectively before.
I think it's reinforced how important it is to maintain those really close links. It's about asking that fundamental what matters most to you question, especially when patients are too poorly and they can't tell us that themselves. The family give you really rich insight into what does matter most. I think it's shown us actually that we are able to keep families connected through FaceTime calls, through enabling them to do mobile phone calls, and that's definitely a way that we'll be working more as we go into the future.
Having somebody like Ruth who will be there for the duration of a patient's stay, you can't put a price on it.
This hasn't just been about supporting families through Covid-19. This is a very real issue, how we communicate really effectively with patients, with their families, and we need to use the learning from this experience to make sure that we do continue to provide that in a really high quality and consistent way for every single patient that comes through our hospital doors.
I can't thank Lister Hospital enough. We as a family are indebted for the rest of our life.